in, from also students who are part of the Palestinian youth movement. And if I could invite Stefan, where are you at? Yeah, great, wonderful. And we're going to have a conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're so thrilled and honored to have you here.
And thank you to everyone who's attended today. These kind of conversations make sense only when we gather as a community. And thank you to both of our speakers for taking some time out to join us. For folks who haven't seen the film before, like myself, this was very enlightening about some of the student organizing that happened locally. I'm aware of a lot of the stuff that's been happening globally, especially in Gaza. But the student organizing and the messaging that has been sent to administration is also important. And I guess leading into that, our first question would be, could you share a little bit about your involvement with the local organizing here and some of the strategies that the movement was using here?
First of all, thank you guys for having us. I really appreciate it. My name's Muhammad. During the encampment that happened at UFT, I was very heavily involved. I did a role in media and had the negotiations. We watched in the documentary. Some people had similar roles to myself, Speak Up, in Colombia. Before that, I was involved in student organizing for Palestine during my last year at the University of Toronto. So we had like a running student club, Toronto Students in Solidarity with Palestine, and we kind of did all the things that you would think that students would want to do. I mean, we did die-ins and teach-ins and rallies and so on, and we kept demanding that the university give us our 3 demands, which very similar to pretty much every university encampment. Those demands remained constant, which is we want divestment from Israeli institutions and divesting the university's endowment from these kinds of investments. We wanted a disclosure of the university's investments, like that was actually step 1, disclose and divest, because many universities, including our own, didn't exactly tell us what was in their portfolio. But we could really make a lot of inferences, and we knew that they had weapons, but we just didn't know, for example, like which funds or which asset managers, which companies. And so the exact breakdown of the portfolio was a bit shady, and we wanted them to disclose it. And lastly, we wanted them to cut ties with Israeli academic institutions, which were very heavily involved in developing a lot of the regime itself of apartheid. Whether it's the weapons that we see, whether it's like the policy that the Israeli government takes on. A lot of that goes through Israeli universities, which our universities here in Canada have a lot of ties to. So we were doing these demands. Ultimately, it didn't really lead to much by a certain point. And the thought was that we had to kind of escalate our approach with dealing with the administration, especially because they refused to meet with us. And when Colombia started their encampment, it kind of handed us the solution on a silver platter, if you will, like around that time. And that's when the students kind of got to work on that. And kind of the rest is history. And in Toronto, we had the longest running encampment outside of McGill, like it was 63 days long. McGill, yes, they started a bit earlier and they ended a bit later, but we had the largest encampment in terms of physical space. Like that's something I can definitely say for certain. And it was a very long 2 months. The university did not want to relent. There was multiple rounds of negotiations. We'll talk a lot more in detail about that as we go forward. I don't want to take too much time in the beginning. But yeah, that's a bit about myself and my student organizing.
Thank you, Yasin. You guys really held it for too long. Very long 2 months.
It's long on everybody.
My name is Elias, and I'm part of the Palestinian Youth Movement. I started organizing back at York in 2016 as an undergrad. So when the encampment at UFT happened, I was a graduate student, so it was more in a supportive role. But tactics and everything kind of the same. Like for us at York, we passed BDS on the student level back in 2014. Then that led to kind of a negotiation with the university, leading to a Why Divest campaign, a campaign to divest from arms manufacturing at York. At the time, York was a bit more transparent about the endowment fund and where that went. And we had resources to get that. They had investments in Lockheed Martin and multiple other companies that are on the BDS list, the boycott and divestment list. That campaign ran for multiple years of, again, same tactic, delaying, stalling, stopping. They made their route, a process, UACRI, they made a committee that ended up recommending divestment, recommending to divest from these companies, in which, again, it came back to as a recommendations as the university waved away. They didn't take care about it, didn't do anything about it. And we keep seeing that happening again and again, but like the movie said, this kind of oppression only ignites more and more resilience and resistance to that. And that's what we've seen, and hopefully we'll see even more and more. One thing I would like to mention, like, since I've been organizing for a long time, is I think Martin Luther King said, the moral arch of the universe is long, but it always bends toward justice. And this fight is not short. It's going to take years. It's going to build up. The encampments that happened in the last few years, it's just a stepping stone to build into what we want, to get what we want. Even since apartheid South Africa, UFT, 10 years of struggle until they actually divested from apartheid South Africa in the 80s, early 90s. Some universities in Canada actually, like Concordia, never actually officially divested from apartheid South Africa, even after everything changed. So it's a very long run, it's a very long struggle, and we're going to keep generation after generation pushing forward.
Thank you, and we'll do one more question to our panelists before we open it to the audience. So just keep those questions at the back of your mind, and then I'll come around. So the next question that we sort of had is to give you a little bit context of some of the folks in the room. We have a lot of folks who are just about the brink of graduation from the community worker program. So there's a lot of theory about student organizing and community organizing, but how would you say from your experience of being a student organizer and a young person as well, the reality on the ground is different from the theory of student organizing?
Yeah, I mean, okay, if you want to see where theory differs from reality, I would say that with regards to student organizing, the main point of difference, I would say, from a lot of conventional wisdom is that most of student organizing is really just maintaining social relations, and that is the majority of organizing in general. I think when people get into organizing of any kind, obviously there's like the ultimate long-term goal. We have this political vision. We have this vision for what we want to do in the community, these goals that we want to achieve. And then you get into it super excited, right? Like for us, it was like, we want the university to divest. That was step one. Everybody was seeing what was happening. That's
What indication you want the university to want us?
divest.
Divest, thank you.
Yeah. And ultimately, once we got into it, you know, most of your time in any kind of organizing is actually spent like doing the let's say policy work to understand what, you know, investments the university has, right? Nor is it the protests, nor is it any of this stuff. Most of your work in any kind of community organizing, student organizing, city organizing especially, is very much just maintaining social relations. If you have good relationships with people in your group, in other groups that you are working with, you can ultimately call on each other when you need it to be able to have these larger protests, to be able to, I don't know, bring people in to put pressure on a specific target for whatever you guys want to get. But if you don't actually make yourselves trustworthy to the community and like be present with them and actually build with that, none of the theory even matters, right? Like it doesn't matter how you structure an organization if everybody in the org hates each other or has bad culture or something. So we learned that unfortunately like the hard way. Like I think student organizers oftentimes have to reinvent the wheel over and over again, not because we're very smart, it just happens to be that we forget what the wheel even is. And we don't ask people like the guys who are much more experienced than us until it's too late. But I think like, you know, that the best thing to do is to just kind of like speak to people who have had these kinds of experiences in student organizing, whatever university you're in or what cause you're going into. Because oftentimes the problems that you face socially, structurally, whatever it is, have already been done before. And sometimes it can be something that like no one's written down or something, but may solve like a huge problem you have in your group. A bit vague, I know, but the best they have.
You pointed to very important points, and to add to you, like especially when you're organizing as a student, in most cases, again, you're organizing against an administration, university administration, and they know a lot of the facts that Yasin already mentioned. They know there's a high turnover. They know students are going to come, they're going to graduate in 2-3 years, and we can't keep this running. So in terms of that, relationships and also institutional memories throughout the student groups on campus, very important to keep organizing, because most admins are organized. Like during the encampments, actually university administration presidents had their own meetings about the different encampments happening. And they were telling each other, oh, we did this because of police, and they were exchanging stuff. Most cases, students don't have that. Every pocket is isolated in its own university. While the university administrations, they're talking to each other all the time, frequently. So these connections, keeping that institutional memory is very important in the student struggle to bypass the main issue, which is the high turnover. High turn of students coming in, leaving, these social connections staying for a few years in the university. People eventually want to go to a career, want to do something, create a family, but they're also leaving the university with a huge debt, and most administration knows that. And so, like again, like even now, with new changes to OSAP that we've seen with the for the government, what do you think that effect will be on student organizing campuses? Negative. Because now students have more worries. How can I pay my, I can't even cover my tuition. So also that is part of the systematic oppression of student movement, to keep people isolated, segmented, in your own field, not connecting with others, not connecting with other different struggles, but talking through, getting out of your own public circle. So yeah.
I think we take the questions from there.
Yeah.
And if we can take a couple of questions at a time, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Fiona. I have a comment and a question. So I'm also kind of like an old fogey when it comes to organizing. I'm from Toronto, so most of my organizing has to do with the harm reduction movement. We did the injection sites 2017 in Moss Park. That was us. So the thing that I see missing in this movement is having a little bit of union organization backing. I can't speak to how essential having QP behind our backs, so if you want to chat afterwards, I'd love to. But my question is, what do you see is the next step for us as students at George Brown as far as this movement goes?
Sure. Yeah. I totally agree. Union is very important. Again, actually, one of the biggest moments I remember at UFT encampment is the day when we brought Ontario Federation of Labor actually came for a big rally because university were threatening the students to either leave campus or they're gonna raid the campus, and the response was actually getting unions in. They came, OFL, OSU, QP, everyone rallied around the students and protected the encampment. So that's very important. For us, to be honest, we've been relying more on labor for Palestine and making that connection. I know it's not enough, but all of us have a role to connect with unions. And student movement is always eternally connected to union organizing, one way or another. In terms of your question, can you remind me for?
What is the next step for George Brown students as far as this movement goes?
So I'm not too familiar with stuff that happened at George Brown, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be very similar to other campuses, which is one, awareness. We'll keep building awareness. You know, some other people know, but does everyone on campus know about this issue and how it relates to them as students? The second step, more importantly, is always analyzing and knowing what connections that George Brown have with the occupation, with Israeli apartheid, whether it's financial, whether it's academic, is there programs running? In most cases, sometimes you find a program that no exchange student went through. They just keep these programs for no reason. And for example, York had a few of them. So knowing who's the decision maker in university, what connection exists, whether financial programs, exchange programs, and so on. Then again, building same way, educating about it, moving students around it, rallying, connecting it to other stuff like the OSAP changes right now, and again, calling for divestment and boycott. Because that's the main tool you have as students on campuses. One, where is your money going? Where is my tuition going? And what kind of relationships does my university have? So these are kind of the main steps.
Yeah, very, very briefly, just to add on to that. I think with regards to the whole kind of student movement now, like across the board, this is having spoken to people from almost every university here in the GTA, having spoken to people from Columbia, UCLA, like every university that had a Palestine movement, like a lot of them have spoken to people from there who have been active in organizing. A lot of people face the same problems. The current moment that we're in, whether it's in the student movement or in the city, like across the board, we're facing an issue of engagement. We're facing issues of, with the moment kind of calming down a little bit. I mean, now it's back up again. But post ceasefire, there was a little bit of a lull. I think that student movements already face this problem inherently, like you guys said, because of turnover. I think it's very important for anyone involved in the Palestine movement and any other kind of movement to make sure that they focus very highly on recruitment and bringing new students in, such that all the expertise that people have gained in the last 2 years isn't just concentrated with people who are just about to graduate. We need fresh blood in the movement, and we need those people to be trained so that they can take on the responsibilities that the older students have. The other thing that needs to be done is once certain targets are identified, once you know what George Brown is invested in, once you know which departments are complicit, all of this kind of stuff, that's when you can start making connections. A lot of the arms manufacturers that are involved with the State of Israel are also supplying weapons for the genocide in Sudan, for example. This is something that is a clear line that anybody in both movements, whether it's Sudan in solidarity or whether it's the Palestine movement, we should and can organize across the same lines. We have a lot of the same targets. And take that example and run with it, right? There's plenty of different companies, corporations, entities, universities that are complicit in different ways that cross different movements. And once you can identify those, obviously we need to build relationships with each other and understand that, working together makes us stronger on all of these issues. Obviously, unions oftentimes are like the glue that binds you together, right? If you have a student union, if you have, different student groups that are part of that union, that's usually how these things kind of go and the connections are made. But other than that, I would just highly suggest that, people kind of work together to build these relationships. So it's not just, hey, we need you guys for something every once in a while. It's not transactional. It has to be like everybody works well together and knows each other personally and has these kinds of relationships.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? And just to plug the alumni chapter, like Alice and Mohammed was saying, we are good when we have numbers and stay together and connected. So sign up and be on that LinkedIn page.
Hi, my name is Toby. I used to student organize, and for some context, I am one of the directors of the Student Association here. Just for some, for folks here, both of you are coming from two major institutions with historically that we know of are pretty oppressive and tries to silence students a lot, as we see with U of T and during the encampment. Folks might know about TMU's actively trying to suppress the PYM movement over there. So what is your advice for students who feel discouraged or anxiety when it comes to grassroots organization, especially within an institution that is more often than not willing to silence students for the sake of maintaining order, staying aligned with this perception of prestige and an institution that is functioning? Because at George Brown, we see that things are kind of falling apart, and grassroots organizing may be very hard or very discouraging for students when we see, our administration trying to silence us consistently. So what advice would you give to students who may feel anxiety or discouraged to do grassroots organizing? Sorry, I repeated the question just so you can remember.
There is no easy answer to this, unfortunately. And the reason that I say that is because risk is part of the job, unfortunately, right? Like, no matter what kind of organizing you get into, there will always be some modicum of risk. And obviously this risk scales. Like the risk of, for example, doing a risky direct action is not the same as flying for BDS. Although theoretically someone can take a picture of you while you're flying for BDS and put it out there and now you lost your job, right? Like this could theoretically happen. It's not like a 0% chance. What I would say is that you need to kind of do two things. First is that I think that fear is oftentimes the thing that scares, that stops people from doing things the most, even when it is actually possible to get things done. Oftentimes we kind of overestimate fear and the risks that we're taking, which is to say that I think that if you told us when I first started organizing a UFT that we would end up doing something like the encampment, I would not have believed anybody who told me that. Mainly because initially we were just doing things so small that they were just like a rally or a die-in. But over time what happened was that you build your tolerance by doing these things. Like if you start off by doing a small rally of 10 people and I don't know, you are scared of public speaking or you're scared of gathering or whatever it is. Once you go to that rally and that 10-person rally goes okay, suddenly now you're like, okay, this is not the worst thing in the world, maybe I can do something more than that. And you kind of grow through it with time. It's not something that comes automatically. So I wouldn't say throw yourself into something risky, that's not what I'm saying. The other thing I would say is that every person has their own risk assessment. There were a lot of people who were with us who were very, very core to running an organization of the encampment, who, for example, never appeared in media interviews or didn't become publicly facing, because there were specific risks that were tied to them that were more risky than other people, and so they don't want to deal with that. Although in other places they were doing things that you would consider risky. What I'm saying is that each person has their own circumstances, and you need to assess your own circumstances and whatever you're trying to take on. And just because maybe something's not for your own appetite of risk, that's fine. That's not a knock against anyone. It just means that maybe you should focus your time and work elsewhere within the movement, right? Like if you can't do something that's very public facing, that's cool. We need plenty of other people doing different things, different places, right? I'm giving that as an example. But overall, what I'm saying is that people's risk tolerance builds up, and oftentimes you will find people who start off never even imagining themselves doing any of this stuff, going to do a lot of it, even though the universities continue to put pressure on us. At the end of the day, the reason that they crack down so hard is because this is the tactic that they use to discourage other people from doing it. When you see videos of people getting beat up by police because their administration, called the cops on them, that makes you scared that they're going to do the same to you at your university. When that may or may not happen. I mean, at UFT, they called the cops, they didn't come, right? So we got away with it, although other universities didn't. So I'm just saying, with this kind of thing, you need to kind of break that barrier, but also do it kind of mindfully. What is your own tolerance? What can you get away with? What will not completely ruin your life, ideally? These kinds of things. Think about that first, and then also make these assessments.
And to actually have seen, main concept here is there's nothing too small. There's nothing possible you can do that's too small in such a big struggle. Any small thing you're comfortable to do, and you might be comfortable to do more later or not at all. But the smallest thing you can think of that you're able to do for your cause is more than enough. And there's no task too small. The other thing is, like any other struggle with an oppressive force, let's say, with an administration in this case, the university administration. The only way to beat that is to out-organize them. They're already organized. The university has a structure, has a line, a process, etc. The only way you can beat that is by also being organized yourself. In most cases, it's easier to oppress if there's only one student. If you take one student, they get expelled, something like that. The university can't expel 100 students. They can't expel 150 students, for example. So there is, like they say, a protection effect of numbers, of being organized, being over-organized with the body you're dealing with, the university administration. Just like they are organized, you need to be as much organized as them, if not even more, to be able to counteract that. And the way to do that is, again, being self-organized, an action. If you also have your student union behind your back, some of the labor unions, whether it's the staff, like I remember even at York, some of the rallies we did it at the same time as a union also striking for the rights to get a higher wage at university. before why is that? Why did we do that? It's because the university can't track on everyone, especially when you start building power, building more power with others struggles, with other people, other students. Always with individualism and such a struggle, there's always going to be more risk. The only way to counteract that is being more organized and more collective and mass when you're building on university.
Two questions here. Casey.
Hey guys, thank you for being here. I just had a question. I figure out how to phrase this. I had a question about the internet while mobilizing. I've noticed that this movement is a little bit different than maybe some movements in the past, where, for example, us receiving our information from stuff coming from Gaza right now has been, and not from the regular news outlets, if not directly, like from people having those experiences, like Bisan as well, right? So I wanted to know here, when you're organizing for actions or for different types of movements, are you able to do things kind of like, have you had to evolve yourself or organizing online because of risks that may arise or things like that? Like, has that been a useful tool for you guys to be, I don't know if that's making sense, my words are like not coming together, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, have you been able to organize online? Do you need to take extra precautions when you're doing that? Or has it been a good tool for you guys? Or have you also found that it's been like, is there any type of surveillance on there that you found problems as well?
Thank you. What was actually back then, I missed some disagreement because even me, I believe they say something about the internet. Even me, I believe in this King Street area before vacating to the East End. Actually, even UFT is in the East End. Sorry, I forgot the even look at the body, but I've lived in King Street from 12 years ago to 10 years ago. Oh, no, actually, I didn't know about the internet anyways, but I was living in a place that had no Wi-Fi. Well, it's because sorry, because 8 years ago when I left high school, I didn't come here. I didn't notice GBC here. But this is my first time here.
I'll run the mic back.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay, you have questions and we need answers, right? So.
Thank you, Fiona.
Sorry.
No, please, we love the questions.
Right now, answer your first question. Yes, so definitely with changing technology, tools, more encryption and so on, definitely tools have changed, but some basics never change. Basically, any organizing and any group is end of the day that you know that people you organize with. So some of these basics, knowing the people you organize with, who they are, relying on each other, building that trust is always more important than, let's say, an encrypted application or messaging tool or whatever. Because technically, even some of the encrypted apps, there is a level of risk. There's a different level of risk in how much and who can break it, whether your local police or, say, a higher agency, and what kind of risk we're dealing with. Like even journalists and like places of conflict have to change and adapt the way they communicate definitely. But there's different levels of risk. At the end of the day, whether it's an app, a messaging app, let's say Signals or Roll, end of the day you need to know the people you're organizing with, and there's no shortcut for building trust with people as a cornerstone for security, for basic collective security as an organization, as a group, and so on. Tools does change, they are different. Of course, we have to change where we message each other, how we communicate to a certain degree. But there's always a level of risk that we can go away from. But the main basic always remains is getting to know the people you organize with.
Just to add on to that a little bit, because I think that you may be interested in the specifics. I would say that, with regards to tech, for example, like getting the word out there about actions, about things that are going on. Instagram has been very, very, very useful for that. Before Instagram, like, I mean, if you wanted to do something as a rally, like, you know, a student group, like, you have to put out flyers, which we still do, but, you know, like, Instagram still is like a big thing for us. Obviously, mailing lists, whatever it is. Like, we use whatever tech is available to us to do that. And obviously, it's been a problem for certain groups. You know, sometimes Instagram takes down pages. That's obviously not great. In terms of interpersonal messaging, like I said, Signal is pretty decent. Just because, you know, certain other ones are more easy to break, or like they actively track you and things like that. Although, like you said, you know, nothing's bulletproof. Yeah, I would say, like, you know, try your best to mitigate how much of your own stuff is public if you're going to be even remotely public. I would say if you're going to be involved in any kind of movement work, at least put your social media to private, just so that anyone who's looking for you can't directly see your stuff. That has happened to a lot of people who got doxxed, who got, you know, even if they got caught in the crossfire or something, they're not putting themselves out there on purpose, but they just were at a rally and then someone looked them up and found them and things like that. You don't want to be dealing with that ideally, so just hide your socials, put them on private. You know, just basic internet hygiene, I would say, is pretty, it goes a long way.
Maybe we have time for just one last question, folks.
That's a lot of pressure. I can be loud, I can project. It's kind of a two-part question. Given that it takes so much to gather the attention of those who are watching and to sway opinions, do you think that the age of passive resistance has died? Is that a romantic, long-gone age of protest? And obviously, all the information sharing that you do in planning is passive resistance, but outside of that, could you talk about that?
Kind of a short answer to that. So generally, I would say nothing really changed. Like the kind of oppression today is similar to before. Really. And even in South Africa, there was a plethora of different organizations and different tactics that were there that all led to the end of apartheid in South Africa. There wasn't one org, one way, one type. Different countries and different contexts, it's always going to be different. But like we saw in South Africa, there was a plethora of different orgs, from passive to non-passive, that existed, that all led to that goal. And the same exists here. Is whatever you're comfortable in doing, you're going to keep doing that until we get to our goal.
I just want to ask you, what are the challenges with collaborating with other groups, like say with you know, Palestinian movement, with like the Lebanese or the, you know, the Iranian movement? I just want to know, is it hard to collaborate with them?
I think to answer that question, collaborating with anybody is always difficult. Even if it's internal to your own org, by the way, like, you know, within the movement, there's always going to be problems. Within your organization, there will always be problems. Once you add another layer of like other movements, other orgs, there will be also more problems. The challenges, I would say, is that oftentimes like people come from different life experiences, they have different perspectives. Sometimes they have different views on what is tactically sound or not. Sometimes they have different views on what they want to mobilize for or not. And even if you want to collaborate with them on something that you see might be advantageous to everybody, they might disagree for one reason or another. I'm putting this generally, it's not about any specific movement. What I'm saying is that the way that that barrier is broken is, like I said, and I really, really, really want to emphasize with this, is building these interpersonal relationships. If you are organizing across movement lines, but you know the people who are in the other group that are organizing very, very, very well. If you have lunch with them, you know who, you know, their cousins are, and you know what their hobby is and whatever, and you hang out regularly. That means that anytime there's a problem that comes up, you're not going to be at each other's throats, because you at least trust that they're coming at you with good faith, and you're coming at them in good faith. And so these kinds of problems can be broken. If you have a disagreement, it's not just going to be like, okay, you know, I have a problem with you, you have a problem with me, like, now it's going to turn into a big fight and whatever. And like, this happens. Like, it's not even a hypothetical, this happens a lot, right? So to prevent that, like I said, is we need to work better with each other, and this trust is built through just regular community building. Like you need to go out with them, you need to know people, but also just through actions, which can start small. If you do a collaborative event with one group, and then the next time you do a rally, it's a bit bigger than the event, and the next time you guys do a larger campaign, things like that. These things build in each other. You now trust them because you did work with them before, so you know how they work. But you can't go into, like, from 0 to 100, it's like, guys, let's do a campaign together if you guys have never even talked to each other, you know? Which is why, like, I just kind of go to a previous question a little bit. I really want to emphasize organizing in person as much as possible.
Yes.
Not out of, like, security, although that could be a thing. It's mostly out of, if you're talking to people online, over Zoom, over Signal calls, whatever, these things can fill in gaps, but you will never get to know a person personally. You will never get to know their facial expressions, how they're thinking, their body movements, what's on their mind if you're talking to them just on the phone. And I've seen lots of projects fail because people have tried to organize like large-scale things without even meeting each other in person. So these things can fill in gaps. Like obviously we still have calls all the time, right? It's not like you don't call people, but you need to meet in person. Ideally, as much as possible. You have your meetings, set a weekly, monthly general meeting time in person. That's how people get to build their relationships.
Look around the room, this is a great place to start.
Thank you so much, Elias, for joining us today. We are at time, but I'll give you all the opportunity for last comment. If you don't want to add anything more, and with that, I'll say thank you from our side for coming and joining us, and we'll close.
Like the professor already said, this is where all organizing happens. Get to know the people in your group, discuss, go out, talk, and build on that. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, honestly, not much to add for me as well. Like, thank you guys so much for having us. I genuinely wish I had the opportunity to like have these kinds of talks with people when I was first starting the student movement. I know that I was very hard-headed initially, like, you know, lots of students don't want to organize with other people out of paranoia, out of whatever it is. But I think, you know, this is where these kinds of things are built, and hopefully we can help out wherever we can.
Thank you so much from all of us here at George Brown for joining us. I've got to say, when you were talking about fear and risk, there was some fear and risk in